I gave an initial introduction on some of the bigger picture reasons why we're here, but I would love it, Tom, if you would be willing to tell us more about the why electrifying transportation here in Nevada is important.
I aim it right there, all the way to the top. These are technical issues, and yes. Thank you so much. I appreciate it, Brian, and it's a honor and pleasure to be with my distinguished colleagues on the panel. They're truly experts. I consider myself more of a researcher that's really trying to get to some key reasons as to why we should electrify transportation. As a preamble, and this will be relevant to the discussion, my 14-year-old son asked me to remind you this. In America, you watch television. In Russia, television watches you. So the reasons why we should electrify transportation, if I'm aiming right. Okay, so SWEEP, we work on 6 states. Transportation is one of our key programs. The benefits to transportation on electrifying: local air quality, health costs. Come on, B, give me one more. And that's it. Greenhouse gas reduction. And this is where, Brian, your ratepayer benefits, national economic benefits, and finally national security. Air quality. Sorry guys, there we go. One more. I may have to deputize somebody here pretty fast. This is a study that SWEEP undertook. My colleague Matt Frommer and others worked to identify the reduction in emissions from electric transportation in volatile organic compounds, more than a 98% reduction, nitrogen oxides. This study is available. We get it to you, and if you'd like, I'm going to go as fast as I can as soon as I get caught up. And so this PowerPoint and any of the studies will be available as follow-up. In southern Nevada, it's even more important. Over half of the smog is coming from transportation, and low-income communities are more impacted from pollution than our other constituencies in the state. So this is just another graphic in terms of what electric transportation does in terms of reducing emissions. On the light-duty side of things, again, very comparable that electric transportation is a key way to reduce nitrous oxide and others. On mass transit, RTC in northern Nevada and both in the south are looking at electric transportation. This is where the, again, my apologies. Brian, you want to give me a hand and see if you can move me through faster?
Just wave your hand and all.
Yeah, just go. I'll keep up. So health costs are something we don't think about as being tied to transportation policy. Go ahead, the next one. Asthma is prevalent in both ends of the state. Go ahead. And in terms of identifying what is the cost of health care, this was a bit of information I found from CDC, where $1,000 a year in terms of asthma costs, and so fundamentally we're paying for dirty air, and electric transportation is one way to help resolve that. So this was a shot at the Nevada legislature with an electric school bus, and thanks to the Public Utility Commission for the docket facilitating additional funding for electric transportation in the school sector. Climate change, I think this audience is already well familiar, and Brian already addressed, transportation is now the largest emitter. We don't have floods, but now we're impacted by wildfires. Economic benefits of EVs to Nevada. Air quality is an economic development tool. State of Utah has now identified dirty air as the single largest impediment to economic development. We're starting to face that in the state. Fuel costs savings can be an economic stimulus. I'll briefly mention the technology cluster development. A group called American Jobs Project identified batteries as a way, kind of like Silicon Valley. We have the opportunity of becoming Lithium Valley, and all the industries associated with Tesla and the supply chains are a huge economic development opportunity for the state. Nevada with lithium can be a fuel supplier, and we'll get into very briefly how EVs can facilitate tourism. Finally, I'll just mention very briefly that there are potential benefits to all ratepayers. So everybody has an interest. If you're not driving an EV, you should be thankful that Brian and others are driving EVs because it helps everybody within the state. Economics for consumers, electricity is the cheapest fuel available to Nevadans, corroborated by several studies. Go ahead. On the annual fuel savings, we're looking at anywhere from $500 to $1,000 of personal fuel savings when we switch to electric transportation. Operations and maintenance costs are lower, so that each individual driving an EV is going to get savings over time. Go ahead. Oh, sorry. So what is the EV equivalent, or excuse me, the mileage equivalent? Driving an EV, you're talking about 100 miles a gallon over the life cycle of a cost. You're talking literally $10,000 that you'll have in your pocket as compared to more expensive gasoline. Keep going. And where you're at the pump, keep going. So this is where we get into the economics for the state. When we have, these are different, go ahead, one more back, sorry about that. So different levels of market penetration. Right now, we're at about 1% of cars on the roads being electric. When we get up to 1.8%, we're talking about aggregated fuel savings of some $13 million. And as we set targets and in various ways try to accelerate the transition to electric transportation, there will be more savings in consumers' pockets. And go ahead, Brian. The next, where do these savings go? Most of the time, and you can get into where the consumer dollar is spent, most of the time when modest income and middle income folks are saving money, it's going to go straight into the local economy, not on trips to Europe and so forth. Those local expenditures translates into additional jobs in retail and service sectors, so that's another key economic benefit. And this is a really cool slide, Brian. Go ahead and click it. Oh, that's like strangely hypnotic. Yeah, so that's the goal, is to reduce imports of oil into the state and gasoline. Go ahead. Because we're not an oil and gas producer. Other states may have a different set of economic variables. Nevada does not produce much in the way of oil, so we're importing. We don't refine gasoline in the state. That's taking place in Utah and California. What we do have is the gigafactory. Go ahead. Next one. And we have lithium. I saw one study that said that Nevada's lithium potential could represent 25% of global supply. That may be optimistic, but it does represent a new potential industry for the state. Go ahead. EVs and tourism. Why? It's because California is the largest market in the United States. Californians, we'd like to have them come and spend dollars, whether it be in hotel rooms or out in the great outdoors. So you'll see a lot of hotel casinos, virtually everyone I know has installed EV charging stations, and now thanks to the State Energy Office's effort, we're getting electric charging stations, and also thanks to NV Energy, Valley Electric, Overton Power District, for facilitating ecotourism out in the rural parts of Nevada. Go ahead. More EVs on the road benefits all electric ratepayers. Since we've got the commissioners in the audience, I'm just going to make that assertion with a study that recently took place in the state of Arizona, identifying a very high rate of electric vehicle penetration, represented in their study $176 a year potential ratepayer benefit when they got EVs up to. So anyway, a topic of future conversation as we hope to explore. Go ahead. One of the keys to making EVs benefit all ratepayers is to fill in the valleys where we're not currently using electricity at night, and to come up with policies. And I think the NV Energy has a great time of use rate, and so there's opportunities of leveraging our electric system to be more economical by filling the valleys, clipping peaks, and so those are the policy discussions that will be taking place, I'm sure, over time, and have actually already started to transpire. National economics, go ahead, Brian. And that's the end of my...
I just ruined everything.
No worries, no worries. Good. So what has happened because of our federal policy that has been somewhat oil friendly, we have transferred, as T. Boone Pickens said, the largest transfer of wealth in human history out of Americans' pockets over to oil producing countries. So that was back, I think, in 2014. This is in aggregate $4.8 trillion of wealth transfer. It just staggers the imagination. That's just the price of oil. That doesn't include wars and military expenditures and so forth. So we want to keep dollars for transportation within the United States. I thought this was kind of a cool image with Burj Khalifa being put up against the Stratosphere Tower. Clearly, they've got more money than we should be building those things in southern Nevada, right? Next slide. I mean, I see that in Toronto. Right? This is where hundreds of billions of dollars really ought to be staying within the United States and helping Nevada. Electric transportation with electric misspelled. Just a scary reminder of history. Well, how did 9/11 get funded? Go ahead. During one of the great booms with the massive transfer of wealth, the Bin Laden Construction Company became very wealthy, some $5 billion in assets, and one of their family members, go ahead, Osama bin Laden was the mastermind, and that's Mohammed Atta, one of the 9/11. So to some extent, our energy policy impacted our security back then with the funding of terrorism. So we'll just kind of move forward. Iran, still on the axis of evil, still making a lot of money off of oil. This is where we go back to television watching you. So this is a really key, and I'll slow down just briefly. The Russian budget, from my research, they are balanced when oil is in the high 40s or $50 a barrel, meaning that Putin can afford super weapons. Go ahead and keep on going. Let's stop here. So the Russian budget at about $40, $45 a barrel, that's their sweet spot in order that they're not deficit spending. If you go back to the Reagan years, economic pressure helped bring down the Soviet Union. My thesis, and this is my personal, not that of Sweep, is that by dropping the price of oil, we become more secure as a nation because we're not going to be funding the Russians, the Saudis, the Iranians, and other folks whose interests are not necessarily lining up with ours. This is just 2 slides on what Putin is doing, not necessarily going into the specifics of what's happening in Ukraine or in Crimea, but they are spending a lot. They are putting pressure on the U.S. in a number of ways because they've got the money to do so because the price of oil is high. Next slide. So how do we lower the price of oil? Drill, baby, drill, sync fuel, biofuels, hydrogen, highly efficient vehicles, electrifying transportation we're talking about tonight. I suggest that there are additional costs to drilling, baby drilling. Same one, I think this is the Deepwater Horizon. So electric transportation with what we have in Nevada with the 50% RPS, we can power transportation off of renewable energy generated in Nevada. I think that's a really compelling argument. Go ahead. And this, again, on the military side of things, this is, I found this in a Pew Charitable Trust study and a white paper with a former general, General Wald, saying the best way to and if you can't see it, the best way is to reduce oil intensity or to bring to bear the diversity of fuels into the transportation sector. This is best achieved by the electrification of transportation. So the military is looking at electric transportation because electric tanks are safer. They don't blow up like a gasoline or a diesel fuel tank might. So this is a strategic military goal, at least of mine, hopefully of others. Let's get off of foreign oil. Let's quit sending money to people that don't like us. The previous slide, this shows the compounded annual growth rate, or CAGR, where we need to get to. The vertical axis is millions of barrels of oil a year, and then those are market penetration rates. What's really important when you get into compound growth is the first year, right? So it's like if you want to become a millionaire, it's the first $100 or $1,000 or whatever it is. It's the hardest to accumulate, so it's the hardest what we do right now to get Nevada's market penetration of electric vehicles off the ground is going to impact us in 2022, 2025, and so forth. So all the policies being adopted at the PUC and the legislature and so forth, these are really critical, playing our part in getting the rest of the nation to follow suit and electrify transportation. The value proposition, $21 trillion of oil could be displaced by electric transportation in the aggregate. That's a great goal to shoot for. And then who would be against electric transportation? This is my personal opinion. Next slide. Okay, so these are the guys who are neither fans of the Wolfpack, the rebels, or putting downward pressure on oil prices through electric transportation, right? So if we can get oil down to below $40 a barrel, that would be awesome. 2 of the reasons, and this is my last comment, we can put huge economic pressure on the Russians when we get oil to that level, and then we also make certain, from the environmental standpoint, certain oil reserves, such as the tar sands of Canada and other places, they become economical at that level too. So whether you're an anti-Russian imperialist like I am, or an environmentalist like Brian is, getting the price of oil down is of paramount importance. So that's my presentation, a couple of thoughts that maybe you haven't encountered before. These are the whys, and if you've got other ideas, I'd look forward to chatting with you after the presentation and adding some other ideas into the presentation for the future. Thank you so very much. Appreciate it.